Today's video is about the prepositions of place in, on, and at. Shockingly, even native English speakers confuse and misuse these prepositions. Heck, I do too. But there's no shame in making mistakes, be it in English or general poor life choices, of which there are many on my part. After all, we're only human. In any case, today I'll do my best to explain to you when exactly we use these three prepositions. And not only that, but I've also created a PDF document that you can download right now with practical exercises and a list of exceptions to the general rules. A link of it will be in the description box below. So let's quickly jump into it. So what's the basic difference between in, on, and at? In general, we use in, on, and at when talking about time and places. But very broadly, we use in when referring to general big spaces like cities, countries, rooms, and neighborhoods. For example, I live in the UK. By contrast, we use on when talking about more specific, smaller places. So think streets, surfaces, or means of transport like the train. For example, she called me while I was on the train. And lastly, we use at when referring to very specific places, such as your address. For instance, I live at 55 Lama Street, or a specific location, so you'd say, I met my friend at the mall. You should think of these three prepositions as if they were an inverted triangle. In sits at the very top and is used when describing very general places. On is used when talking about more specific places. And at is a preposition of precision that's used in the context of very specific places. But there are, of course, loads of exceptions which I will talk about throughout the video. So let's take a deeper dive into each of these prepositions, starting with in. We said that the preposition in is used when referring to large spaces and also general locations. Take these sentences and phrases as an example. The student is in the classroom. Or I live in London. I live in the United Kingdom. I live in a neighborhood like in Westminster. Or I got lost in Paris. Clearly here, a city or a country or a neighborhood qualify as large spaces, so that's pretty easy to remember. But we also use in when we're in closed spaces like in a car. However, you wouldn't say in the bus or in the plane because these are considered larger places than a car since you're able to actually walk in them. So instead you'd say on a bus or on a plane. Now, in is also used when referring to parts of the day, months, and years. The way you can remember this is by thinking about a date, like your birthday, for example, which is made up of day, month, and year. All three of these are used with the preposition in. So you would say, I have an English test in the morning, or I'm getting married in July, or I was born in January. And then you'd also use in when talking about seasons, like in spring or in winter, as well as centuries, like in the 1800s or in the 19th century. So what about the preposition on? First, we use on to refer to a position on a surface. For instance, I left my keys on the kitchen table, or the cat is sleeping on the chair, or there's trash on the floor, please pick it up. You'd also use on when talking about days of the week. So for example, I have an exam on Monday. Crucially, on is used with specific dates, like the sentence, World War I started on 28th of January 1914. And not only that, we also use on when describing a position along a road, by the sea or river, and so on. For instance, we'd say, Dresden lies on the river Elbe. and not Dresden lies in the river Elbe or at the river Elbe. Like we said earlier, if you're on public transport, keyword on, you'd say something like, I'll call you later, I'm on the bus, or I'm on the plane. But, and this is a big but, if you're traveling from one place to another, you'd say by. For example, Jack goes to work by bus and not on the bus. And since on is used to refer to more specific places than in, you should use the preposition on when referring to a floor in a building. For example, I live on the 25th floor. Strangely enough, and English is strange enough already, if you're talking about a show or a movie you recently watched, you would use the preposition on. As another example, there was a great show on TV last night, but I can't remember the name. And the same goes for content platforms like Netflix or Amazon Prime. Did you see that show on Netflix, or did you see that show on Amazon Prime? Lastly, and confusingly, remember that on is used when talking about holidays, but only when the holiday is followed by the word day. Yes, you heard that right. And so you'd say, I received a lot of presents on Christmas Day, even though the general rule is that we use in when talking about days. Finally, when do we use the preposition at? When talking about time, we use the preposition at when we're referring to the time, midnight, night, and noon. So if I ask you, what time is the party tonight? You can reply by saying, it's at 8 o'clock. Or, I have a Zoom meeting at 2 o'clock. And remember how we said that in is used when referring to parts of the day, morning, afternoon, and evening? Well, when we talk about midnight, or in some cases night, we also use the preposition at. For example, the fireworks start at midnight, or I have a meeting at noon. Night, however, is extremely tricky. It's used with at when we're talking about all of the night. For instance, the weather gets cold at night. However, when we are talking about a short period of time during the night, we use in with the word night. So you'd say, I heard a strange knock on my door in the night, because it happened at a specific time in the night. And what about using at with very specific places? First, we use at when we talk about an address. For instance, I live at 22 Queen Street. Or let's say you go to a restaurant at 123 East Street. But remember, if you're talking about a generic address, so without referring to street numbers, you'd say on Queen Street or on East Street, because it's not a specific address after all. The same goes for specific locations like a coffee shop, where you'd say, I met my friend Jack at Starbucks for a coffee. And when we talk about a location someone is at, we also use the preposition at, because again, we're referring to an exact location. For example, she's sitting at her desk, or she's sitting at the kitchen table. Importantly, and don't forget this, we use at when referring to a party, school, shops, college, university, cinema, and theater. So I can say, for example, I studied law at UCL, and UCL is a university. Or I bought a delicious pastry at the bakery across the street. Now that you know when and how we use the prepositions in, on, and at, check out the free PDF document that I created with practical exercises to test your knowledge. Remember to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel to never miss an English lesson.